Story 1. The plane is down to one engine. How far do you think one engine can take us? All the way to the scene of the crash, which is convenient because that's where we're going. I needed to set up. Thanks for understanding. Story 2. Think about how uninformed the average person is and recognize that half of them are less informed than that. Story 3. Sean Locke. Everything he says in carrot in a box. Rest in peace, legend. Story 4. Boy, these conservatives are really something, aren't they? They are all in favor of the unborn and will do anything for them. But once you are born, you are on your own. Pro-life conservatives are obsessed with the fetus from conception to 9 months. After that, they do not want to know about you. They do not want to hear from you. No neonatal care, no daycare, no Head Start, no school lunch, no food assistance, no welfare, nothing at all. If you are preborn, you are fine. If you are preschool, you are in trouble. Story 5. Here's my idea for a sport. You knock a ball into a gopher hole. Oh, you mean like pool? No, not with a straight stick, but with a little curved stick. It goes on for a while. Story 6. George Carlin. The 7 dirty words you cannot say on television. Story 7. But I backed down because I didn't know how many of them it would take to defeat me, but I knew how many they would use. Ron White. Story 8. Here's a phrase that airlines seemingly made up. Near miss. They say that if two planes almost collide, it's a near miss. That's incorrect. It's a near hit. A collision is a near miss. I just witnessed Neil deGrasse Tyson use this joke in the past week. Give George the credit he deserves. Story 9. If I wasn't supposed to pet you, then you wouldn't have been a dog. That's how the world works. Story 10. I love Taylor Tomlinson's arm flow-a-tie joke. Now you've turned Kevin into an arm flow-a-tie, and that's not fair to Kevin. Story 11. Why is it that people who are against abortion are those you would not want to engage with in the first place? Another quote from the late, great George Carlin. Story 12. I went into the kitchen to make a sandwich, but the power was out. Fortunately, my camera has a flash, so I took 347 pictures of my refrigerator. My neighbors called the police and said there was lightning in my house. Story 13. Forget the dealers. If you want to slow down drug trafficking, you need to start addressing some of these bankers. White, middle-class Republican bankers. Story 14. Russell Howard on 2 men kissing on a plane. But it's unnatural. You're flying through the sky in an airplane. Story 15. I like the line from Louis C.K., where he talked about a huge monster stomping down Main Street, wrecking buildings, tossing cars, and squashing people. He then said, now that would be quite a sight. Story 16. One I think of a lot is, I think we are in trouble unless someone, eliminates Jeffrey Bezos. Stavros Halkias. Story 17. Gay men experience insecurities similar to women while also having a strong desire for intimacy like men. They are akin to a combination of traits from both genders. Story 18. I didn't know how many of them it would take to defeat me, but I knew how many they were going to use. Story 19. I like people, but I prefer their company in short bursts. I don't enjoy being around people for extended periods. I can tolerate them for a little while, but once it goes beyond a minute or a minute and a half, I need to leave. Story 20. You don't have any ice cream because you are on welfare and can't afford it. You dropped your ice cream. Story 21. My neighbor is a 90-year-old man with Alzheimer's disease. I see him every morning, and he asks me if I have seen his wife. Every day, I have to tell him that his wife died 20 years ago. I could have moved to another house or even ignored his question. But the look of joy in his eyes whenever I answer him is worth it. Story 22. Not sure if they are that famous, but 2 pop into my head all the time. Dane Cook, shoes, forget shoes. Eddie Izzard, death or cake? A cake, please. Story 23. Not funny. From John Mulaney's retelling of the time Mick Jagger told him that his jokes weren't funny. Every time my family is out to dinner and there is a jukebox, we spend several dollars playing What's New Pussycat at least 5 times, with a random, it's not unusual thrown in. It's just understood at this point. Story 24. It's like not engaging in an intimate act for 10 years and then painting the garage. Oh my goodness. I'm seeing deceased monarchs. Patton Oswalt. Story 25. If you are comparing the negativity of two words, and you cannot even say one of them, that is the worst word. Story 26. If you want to know what having 4 kids is like, just imagine you are drowning and then someone hands you a baby. The affable Jim Gaffigan. Story 27. I walked up to President Obama at a gala and said, Mr. Obama, you're one of the most powerful people in the world. I was curious if you still experience racism despite being President of the United States. He looked me in the eyes and said, I'm Kanye West. Sarah Silverman. Story 28. Mitch Hedberg. I was at this casino minding my own business, and a guy approached me and said, You need to move, you're blocking a fire exit. As if, in the event of a fire, I wouldn't run. If you're flammable and have legs, you're never blocking a fire exit. Story 29. There are other interesting events in the Olympics, such as the luge. I am curious about which innovative individual invented that sport. Who decided to dress like a humorous character and slide down an ice track? How do you steer in that position? The response might be to engage the core and maintain control during the descent. Story 30. If you run a company and cannot explain in one sentence what it does, then it is against the law. Lewis Black. Story 31. Someone mentioned the police, and in a moment of word association, I yelled, Forget the police, and everyone else joined in. Story 32. I like to start conversations with, I'm not racist, but you look nice today. However, they usually reply, That wasn't racist at all. I then respond, I know, I just finished saying I'm not racist. You never listen. Typical response. It was on Comedy Central in the late 1990s, and I've remembered that specific joke. Story 33. Jack and Jill went up the hill, both with $1.25. Jill came down with $2.50. Story 34. Eddie, what time is it? Eddie, why did you put your phone in the sink? We have McDonald's and you don't have any. Story 35. My aunt used to say, Slow and steady wins the race. She died in a fire. Haiku by Bo Burnham. I share it every time people are sharing haikus. Story 36. At that point, I had the right to remain silent but not the ability. I don't know how many people it would take to throw me out of the bar, but I know how many they were going to use. Story 37. Just walking around the office eating some pretentious fruit, like a pear. Bill Burr on Steve Jobs. Story 38. I used to do drugs, I still do, but I used to as well. Mitch Hedberg. A source of many memorable one-liners. Story 39. Ali Wong has had many experiences. Oh no, I slept with a homeless guy. Again. My mom doesn't understand finding other men attractive. She has only really spent time around my father and my husband. Meanwhile, I have met every single one of the Avengers, and I want them all. Story 40. I have a large seashell collection that I keep scattered on beaches all over the world. Maybe you have seen it. Story 41. I received a phone call yesterday with bad news. Grandma is going to die. I know this sounds cold, but I am not paying the ransom. Story 42. The entire final rant in No Cure for Cancer by Dennis Leary is something I still revisit every few years. Story 43. I have a list of things I do not care to do. It rhymes with bucket. I can tell you that much. There are 5 levels of drinking, 6 if you live in a trailer park, but we will not discuss that now. Story 44. I don't know who it was, but back in the 1990s, there was a Def Comedy Jam episode where a woman walks out and claims to be a gold digger. I'm a proud gold digger and I don't care what you say. You can call me anything you want, but one thing you won't call me is broke. Now, there's a difference between a gold digger and a prostitute. A prostitute will engage in sexual acts for money. But not only will I engage in those acts, I'll hold it in my mouth until the swelling goes down. The place erupted. Joe Torre walks out shaking his head and simply says, and I'll hold it in my mouth until the swelling goes down. Story 45. Today, A young man realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather. Story 46. My favorite line was from a comedian performing at a bar in New York City. She was discussing a poster the Metropolitan Transportation Authority put out, featuring a man with Down syndrome named Tito. It read, "Tito works for the MTA. Tito has Down syndrome." She said it was really great and that she fully supported it, but every time her train was late, she thought it was because Tito was pressing all the buttons. It has stuck with me forever, and whenever I want to call someone stupid, Tito or Mr. F are my go-to names. Story 47. I took my daughter to the circus, and there was a bear riding a bicycle. My daughter asked how they taught a bear to ride a bike. I said they nail his feet to the pedals and beat him. He's not riding, he's running. Story 48. They tell you during an earthquake you should shelter in a place that is structurally sound. If there is nowhere else, at least stand in a doorframe. However, you are not always in a position to stop what you are doing to take shelter. Therefore, I am considering building a doorframe over my toilet. Story 49. Way back in the early to mid-1980s, HBO Comedy on Campus featured a comedian who said, "Remember, every woman wants sex. The kicker? It's probably not with you." Story 50. Now she was a real historical figure, that French princess. But at the time of the death of William Wallace, also known as Braveheart, your national hero, she was only 4 years old. Now, Glasgow, I'm not saying that William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, didn't have relations with her. He probably did. But if he did, and he definitely did, right? It would have been a far less romantic scene than the one portrayed by Mel Gibson in the film Braveheart. It may have happened in a tent, but it still wouldn't have been a romantic scene because that would have made William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, a pedophile. A Scottish pedophile, the worst kind of pedophile. Story 51. Jim Gaffigan said, "There is a vegetarian hot pocket for those who don't want to eat meat, but still want to have digestive issues." Story 52. Pete Holmes says, "Nothing makes sense. You're on a planet right now. You think you're in America or any country. Zoom out. You're on a space rock, floating through infinite nothingness, and that infinite nothingness is expanding. That means endlessness is getting bigger. That makes no sense." Story 53. I went for a walk last night, and she asked me how long I would be gone. I said the whole time. Story 54. When you're running down the street on fire, people will get out of your way. Richard Pryor, live on the Sunset Strip. I know the guy had a huge drug problem, but I was really happy that he overcame it before he passed away. The self-deprecating way he expresses it just cracks me up. Story 55. Heckler. How many kids do you have? What? Do you have kids? No. Then you can't talk about parenting. Listen, if I see a helicopter in a tree, I don't need to be a helicopter pilot to know someone messed up. Story 56. Marsha Warfield was talking about how she dated men older than her because they lasted longer in bed. Marsha's response was, "Who wants to be with an older man for a long time? Feels less funny now that I am 58. Story 57. I believe that drugs have contributed positively to our lives. If you disagree, I encourage you to think about this. Go home tonight and get rid of all your albums, tapes, and CDs. The musicians behind the great music that has enriched your life over the years were often heavily influenced by drugs." Story 58. Women go to court and receive financial support because they are accustomed to a certain lifestyle. What about what a man is accustomed to? I'm used to being intimate with her 4 times a week. Now I should be able to have that intimacy at least twice a week. I mean, she can have the alimony, but I want some form of consideration in return. Story 59. Gay Pride, White Power. Doug Stanhope in San Francisco, circa 2010. It made sense by the end of the show, but it's burned into my brain. Story 60. I'm afraid you have the ring number. It's okay. You'll be okay. Just put the phone down slowly. Ben Bailey. Story 61. See this? Know what it is? It's sand. Do you know what will be here in 1,000 years? Sand. Food doesn't grow in sand. We have deserts in America too, but we don't live in them. Story 62. Tommy Little's self-diagnosed genius on Amazon is hands down the best stand-up show I've ever seen, from start to finish. It's practically a comedy story time. His accent chanting "wet is death" is consistently in my mind. Story 63. A man in New York is suing his landlord because the water in the shower was so hot that it scalded him. That certainly is an unusual way to test the water. I think about this every time I shower. Story 64. You don't understand. I am not scared of you. Bernie Mac. Story 65. As usual, the delivery made this 100% funnier than it would be read without the pregnant pauses. But Larry Miller had this one. Women are the most powerful magnet in the world, and all men are cheap metal. Then, more softly to bring that joke home, and we all know where due north is. Then even softer, I don't know a way to put it more nicely than that. Story 66. Shane Gillis has a lot of humor. His joke about worrying about your face during intimacy is memorable. If I let my face go, I look like Brandon Dassey from Making a Murderer. I don't think I've ever made a woman make a sound with my body, except when I first lay down on top of them, and they're like, strained voice, "Whoa, Jesus, mister." The Navy SEALs segment and the George Washington House Tour segment from Beautiful Dogs are outstanding. He is incredibly talented. Story 67. I don't know who it was, but it has stuck with me for years. Put a shirt on, you're scaring the children. Put some pants on, you're teasing the dog. Story 68. Frederick Karl Perwetzel was born in New York City in 1954. He changed his last name to Prinz because he wanted to be known as the Prince of Comedy. He achieved this at age 19 when he performed on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He had dropped out of high school to pursue comedy full-time after discovering his affinity for it. A year later, in 1974, he was cast as Francisco Chico Rodriguez on the hit sitcom Chico and the Man. His catchphrase, "It's not my job," helped him become a full-fledged celebrity. In 1975, he released a full-length comedy album titled Looking Good. Story 69. I believe that in marriage, it can be nice to be with someone of your own race. The advantage is that you can go home and share similar experiences. You can express yourselves openly without needing to explain anything. My husband is half Filipino and half Japanese. I am half Chinese and half Vietnamese. We often share jokes about Korean culture. It's a unique bond that brings us closer together. Story 70. Very regional, but this comedian had a line about Orange County fathers and their necks being enormous that had me in stitches. It was an entire bit about Orange County kids with electric bikes that I loved. Story 71. I say, whatever a man, a woman, another woman, and a little person do to a donkey, that's their business. Story 72. The big yellow one is the sun. For some reason, that Brian Reagan CD has been burned into my memory. Story 73. Lisa Lampanelli from the Larry the Cable Guy roast. Listen, Hulk Hogan. That's the sound of a 19-year-old's balls hitting your ex-wife's chin. Story 74. Norm discusses being a serial killer and kidnapping someone, taking them to a shed where no one else can hear the person scream, concluding with, "And then I do that thing, that makes me feel like a god." There is something inherently hilarious about that kind of delivery paired with obscenity. Well-executed downplaying feels like perfectly timed relief to me. Story 75. Wow, the post directly below this one for me is John Mulaney's horse in the hospital bit. Story 76. Mr. Foxworthy, here in the state of Alabama, when towing your boat, it is required to have a trailer under it. Also, please tell those individuals back there to pull in their fishing lines. There is no fishing on the highway. Story 77. I will discuss the phrase to kill two birds with one stone, which is Ken Cheng's entire routine on this expression. Story 78. Not a joke, but I went to a comedy show in Los Angeles at the end of 2020, and the stand-up comedian genuinely asked why everyone was wearing masks, as it was required at the venue. That was memorable. Story 79. Just about every line from a George Carlin routine. Many are still on YouTube, thankfully. My favorite these days. Inside every cynical person, there is a disappointed idealist. When you're born, you get a ticket to the freak show. When you're born in America, you get a front row seat. Story 80. I was so caught up in the euphoria of having all that apple juice that, for a moment, I lived in a world where racism did not exist. Hannibal Buress. Story 81. Things you don't want to hear on your first day in prison. Hello, my name is Bubba. It's a good thing you came in on a Friday. Friday is but sex day. Not many people opt out. Story 82. It's a big club and you are not in it. George Carlin. Story 83. I want to spend all my wishes enjoying that moment. You should start listening to his podcast. It's as close as I'll get to a stand-up tour. Story 84. Dad is great. He gives us chocolate cake. Someone has to say this every time chocolate cake is served. It's a shame he ended up being a bad person. Story 85. Ron White made a joke about his wife wanting no sexual contact during her period. They don't shut down the whole amusement park because the roller coaster is broken. You're not standing outside the fence like, the log ride still works. I think most people didn't realize that it's a humorous reference to an intimate topic. It's quite clever. Story 86. I had a friend who hurt herself. Yes, when she was exposed, her skin resembled a harshly graded test score. Story 87. Jeff Dunham is talking with Ahmed the dead terrorist. So, of all your wives, do you have a favorite? Oh yes. She is the greatest of all time. So she's your greatest of all time? Ahmed says nothing. Story 88. You drive a light blue Prius, play with dolls, and have a teacup chihuahua. You're gay. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.